What's going on, YouTube? This is As Seen by Dave, coming to you from Riverside, California. I'm going to be talking to you about another possible Zodiac victim. So I do have another video if you want to check my other videos out of Robert Dominguez and Linda Edwards, who were murdered on the Central Coast. This case is about Cheri Josephine Bates, better known as Cheri Jo Bates, is a Riverside, California resident. She was born in Omaha, Nebraska. Her and her family moved to Riverside, California. Her parents divorced in 1965. Cheri Jo was a really good student and athlete. So Cheri Jo graduated high school from Ramona High School, which is about a half mile down the road. She was a cheerleader. She was dating a high school athlete who graduated a couple years before her and was living and going to school up in San Francisco on a football scholarship. She recently got engaged to this gentleman. Now, Cheri Jo had aspirations of being an airline stewardess. She was attending a local community college here in Riverside Community College, better known as RCC. Now, on the morning of October 30th, 1966, Cheri Jo and her father went to Sunday Mass at St. Catherine's here in town. She came home. Her father had left. Around 4:30 p.m., eyewitnesses said they saw Cheri Jo leave the house, which I will show you here in a second. Cheri Jo left a note on the fridge letting her dad know she was headed to RCC's library to go study. Her friend had misplaced some of her note cards, so Cheri Jo needed to go to the library and study and create some new note cards. She had a lime green Volkswagen Beetle, which she saved up her own money to buy. She was working part-time jobs. She was working at a bank here in town called the Riverside National Bank, just to make some extra money while she was going to school. But she had purchased her own lime green Volkswagen Beetle, Volkswagen Bug, whatever you would call it. I call them Volkswagen Bugs. I call the new ones Volkswagen Beetles, or the newer ones, the ones that came out in the 90s. Now, Cheri Jo, sadly, was murdered after coming out of the library. I will get to that in a little bit. Now, when Cheri Jo left her house, like I said, she had placed a note on the fridge letting her dad know where she went. She would be back after going to the college's library. Now, the college's library closed at 9 p.m. By all accounts, Cheri Jo had left between 7:30 p.m. and 9 p.m. She might have stayed till they were closing. So this is the house where Cheri Jo lived with her father. Her parents divorced in 1965. Her older brother joined the Navy, so he was no longer living in the home. Her mother and her father divorced in 1965. Her mother struggled with mental illness and was institutionalized. Her mother ended up passing away in 1969 of poisoning. They're not sure if foul play was involved or if it was a suicide. Cheri's neighbors and witnesses remember her leaving her house around 4:30 p.m. After leaving her house, Cheri Jo more than likely stopped for a bite to eat. She had called her friend and asked her if she wanted to join her at the library for some studying. Now, her friend actually told her she couldn't make it, so Cheri Jo went to the RCC library by herself. There were some witnesses I assume with her her lime green VW Bug, it was easily to spot her and possibly remember that car's whereabouts. Now, one of Cheri Jo's friends, had seen Cheri Jo driving towards the RCC library, and she was trying to wave her down. However, Cheri Jo did not see her. That was between 4:30 and 5. Here is the RCC, the Riverside City College. My apologies, I said Riverside Community College earlier. However, I know it is Riverside Community College. The RCC, Riverside City College. This is the library, which is, I'm sure, gotten many facelifts over the years. It's been 59 years, almost 59 years since Cheri Jo Bates was murdered. Now here's the library. She would have parked her car either here on the street leading up here or on the street that goes down this way. So her VW Bug would have been down there. Her lime green VW Bug would have been down there. She would have been here in the library for hours, studying, taking notes. When she came out, her VW Bug wouldn't start. She got in, set her books down on her seat, was trying to start her car for possibly 2 minutes. And I say 2 minutes because somebody sent in a letter later in November about how long she was trying to start her car. He was waiting for her to start her car. In the letter, it says, for 2 minutes, they waited for her to start her car. Unbeknownst to her, the distributor cap was unplugged. There were greasy fingerprints found in her hood, under her hood. In a VW Bug, it's not like you have to pop the hood from the inside of a car to gain access to the motor. So the assailant could have just gone, popped the hood, which the VW Bug, if you don't know, the motor is in the back of the car where your normal trunk would be. He popped the hood, there was fingerprints found. Now, he popped the hood, he pulled the distributor wire off of the distributor cap, which would stop any power from getting to the points, which would stop the spark plugs from getting any power. And that would stop the motor from having any spark and not being able to have combustion, and the motor would not be able to start. Now the motor was turning over, obviously from the starter. She was trying to start it. The starter turns the motor over. When the police found her car, her windows were down a little bit. Now what they think happened is the assailant asked if she needed some help, which I'm sure in 1966 things were a little different. It's not like now. I don't know if a young lady would allow somebody to come help her, especially a strange man come up and help her, but apparently she let somebody help her. And again, this is the theory that he walked her over here. Now, I am in between the library, which is right here, and there's a couple new buildings. Obviously, these are newer looking, but there were 2 abandoned houses at one time. I haven't decided if I'm going to post the picture or not because it's pretty gruesome. I might just blur Cheri Jo Bates out. But between the 2 buildings, between the 2 abandoned houses, her body was found the morning of Halloween, 1966. A groundskeeper actually found her body. Now, to back up a little bit, Cheri Jo's father started worrying that night because, like I said, she had a note on the fridge that said she would be home after going to the library. He knew the library closed on Sundays at 9 p.m. So why wasn't Cheri Jo back home? She would have left a note saying, hey, after the library, I'm going to go out with some friends, going to go out to eat, going to go hang out at such and such's house. However, she did not return. At 5:30 the next morning, Cheri Jo's father was getting more and more worried. He went to the Riverside Police Department, filed a missing persons report. Now, before the police could start any kind of investigation, a groundskeeper at RCC unfortunately found Cheri Jo Bates deceased between these two abandoned houses. So there's a street here. Like I said, at one time there was abandoned homes here. In 59 years, you can imagine how much has changed here at the Riverside City College. But between the two abandoned homes, they found Cheri Jo Bates deceased. Over 40 stab wounds. They found she was almost decapitated because of the knife wounds in her neck. The jugular was severely cut that she was almost decapitated. Investigators believe it was a 3-inch blade that was used. She did have some defensive wounds, so her father said she was in fairly good shape, so she more than likely tried to fight back. In her right hand, she had some of the assailant's hair. The hair did not belong to her. Now, you got to remember, in 1966, crime investigation wasn't what it is now. Fingerprints, there was no DNA. So they would check fingerprints and they would check the hair samples, and they knew that it didn't belong to Cheri Jo Bates, but they didn't have a database to try and track anybody down. So this is an unsolved case still to this day in 2025 for the murder of Cheri Jo Bates. Cheri Jo Bates did try to fight back. There was a cheaply made Timex gold watch found a few feet away from her body, and it had some white paint on it, so they're thinking in the struggle she must have ripped it off of the assailant's hand, or I should say the wrist. She tried to fight back, but unfortunately the assailant had the upper hand, and she was murdered on the evening of October 30th, 1966. She was 18 years old. She was buried at the Crest Lawn Pierce Brothers Cemetery here in Riverside, California. So 1 month after Cheri Jo Bates' murder, the Riverside Police Department and the Press Enterprise, which is a local newspaper here in Riverside, received a letter supposedly from the killer, typed up. However, it was sent on carbon copies, so it was really hard to identify what kind of typewriter it was. The envelope had no fingerprints, which I'll share now. She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. She is not the first and she will not be the last. I lay awake nights thinking about my next victim. Maybe she will be the beautiful blonde that babysits near the little store and walks down the dark alley each evening about 7. Or maybe she will be the shapely blue-eyed brunette that said no when I asked her for a date in high school. But maybe it will not be either. But I shall cut off her female parts and deposit them for the whole city to see. So don't make it too easy for me. Keep your sisters, daughters, and wives off the streets and alleys. Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. She did not put up a struggle, but I did. It was a ball. I first pulled a middle wire from the distributor, then I waited for her in the library and followed her out after about 2 minutes. The battery must have been about dead by then. I then offered to help. She was then very willing to talk to me. I told her that my car was down the street and that I would give her a lift home. When we were away from the library walking, I said it is about time. She asked me about time for what? I said it was about time for her to die. I grabbed her around the neck with my hand over her mouth and my other hand with a small knife at her throat. She went very willingly.
Her breast felt warm and very firm under my hands, but only one thing was on my mind, making her pay for the brush-offs that she had given me during the years prior. She died hard. She squirmed and shook as I choked her, and her lips twitched. She let out a scream once, and I kicked her in the head to shut her up. I plunged a knife into her, and it broke. I then finished the job by cutting her throat. I am not sick, I am insane. But that will not stop the game. This letter should be published for all to read. It might just save that girl in the alley, but that's up to you. It will be on your conscience, not mine. Yes, I did make that call to you also. It was just a warning. Beware, I am stalking your girls now.
So the murder of Cheri Jo Bates took the innocence of Riverside. So I am at Crestlawn Pierce Brothers Cemetery in Riverside, roughly 10 miles from Riverside City College, where Cheri Jo attended and where she was brutally murdered after spending the night in a library on October 30th, 1966, almost 59 years later. I'm here to pay my respects. However, she is not here, unfortunately. Went to the front office. There's no records of her. There was a rumor that she was moved in the 80s, that her family decided to exhume her body and cremate her and spread her out to sea. So maybe her grave location had too many visitors. They wanted maybe more of a peaceful location for her. So unfortunately, I'm not able to find her grave or her headstone. Maybe her family sold the plot. But rest in peace, Cheri Jo, taken at the young age of 18 after studying in the library, survived by her father, her mother, and her older brother, Michael. Thanks everyone for watching As Seen by Dave. Like and subscribe to my channel, As Seen by Dave, here on YouTube. And I also have an Instagram, As Seen by Dave. Leave me a comment, follow me on Instagram. Make sure you're sharing, subscribing, liking to my channel, As Seen by Dave. Until next time, out.